Cop lies against innocent black woman in court, unaware she's a billionaire investigator. Every so often, a single moment can shatter the delicate illusions we carry about law, power, and justice. In the heart of Washington, D.C., an unassuming black woman named Vanessa Price found herself cornered by a cop who believed he held all the cards. But what Officer Reggie Wilcox didn't realize was that Vanessa possessed both the hidden brilliance of a seasoned investigator and a fortune rivaling that of the most powerful magnates. His lies in court, delivered with chilling confidence, were set to unravel the life of a woman he assumed to be defenseless. But when the tables turned, hard karma awaited. Vanessa Price was not a household name. If one were to spot her in a crowd, they might notice her impeccable posture and the quiet poise in her eyes, but they'd never guess she was worth more than many of the CEOs who graced the covers of Forbes. Vanessa stood 5 feet 8 inches tall, with a smooth complexion that bore testament to her disciplined lifestyle and the careful privacy she guarded at all costs. She came from a lineage that valued both discretion and sharp intellect. Her grandfather was a brilliant mathematician who'd patented an algorithm that transformed global markets decades ago, laying the foundation for the family fortune. Her parents, philanthropic at heart, turned that fortune into thriving investments from real estate to tech startups. By the time Vanessa reached her mid-20s, she had inherited a formidable trust, yet she'd chosen not to simply sit on her wealth. Instead, she pursued an unorthodox career: private investigations, security consulting, and justice advocacy. Operating under the radar suited Vanessa perfectly. She preferred modest apartments over penthouse suites and public libraries over exclusive country clubs. It was in these everyday spaces that she observed the world most honestly, watching, listening, and learning how to expose corruption through quiet infiltration. In a city like Washington, D.C., where power often disguised prejudice, Vanessa's low-key approach served her well. She also possessed a brilliant mind for forensic analysis. After completing an undergraduate degree in computer science at Howard University, she obtained advanced certifications in digital forensics and legal investigations. Her day-to-day routine involved unraveling hidden financial records for law firms and NGOs that fought corporate fraud or governmental abuse. She had an almost uncanny ability to locate missing data or piece together a chain of evidence that others might have missed. In her free time, Vanessa volunteered with community organizations addressing racial bias in policing, though she remained careful to keep her identity as a benefactor hidden. For her, anonymity was power, power to act without being cornered by others' expectations or manipulations. Rarely did she appear in press photos or interviews, and even fewer people knew that she was the quiet financial backbone behind several charities in the district. Unknown, wealthy, incisively analytical, Vanessa Price was a secret weapon who had toppled corrupt politicians and unscrupulous CEOs alike. Yet, ironically, she never expected to be personally targeted by the very injustice she spent her life combating. That was about to change in a way no one, least of all Officer Reggie Wilcox, could have foreseen. Officer Reggie Wilcox had been with the Metropolitan Police Department for over 15 years. He was known among his peers for a strict, unyielding attitude, one that often verged on intimidation. He had developed a reputation for being able to handle suspects to get the right result. By the time he reached his 40s, Wilcox carried a subtle arrogance that grew in tandem with each questionable accolade on his record. On paper, he was a decorated officer, praised for heroic arrests and daring busts. Behind the scenes, however, rumors circulated of his willingness to bend the truth if it meant padding his statistics. Complaints from citizens, particularly from communities of color, had been quietly dismissed or lost in departmental bureaucracy. Wilcox prided himself on being a man who kept criminals in their place, an attitude that came with a perilous assumption. The people he arrested lacked the means or knowledge to fight back effectively. His chosen method typically involved cornering unsuspecting individuals, especially those who seemed unable to mount a strong legal defense. A local civil rights group had, in hushed tones, flagged Wilcox as someone who might be systematically targeting low-income neighborhoods. But with no concrete evidence, their protests remained unresolved. Departmental higher-ups gave Wilcox leeway, likely because he delivered an impressive arrest record, never mind the background details. That evening, as Wilcox drove his cruiser through a neighborhood near Columbia Heights, he was on the lookout. He had a tip, possibly fabricated, possibly real, of local petty theft around the Whole Foods Market store on W Street. Wilcox's intelligence told him a suspect with certain features might appear that night. He relished these moments. The tension, the chance to demonstrate his authority, gave him an almost perverse satisfaction. He stopped his car at a dimly lit corner and surveyed the area. Couples strolled by, some teenagers laughed by a food truck, and a few buskers performed jazz tunes for passers-by. Wilcox's gaze flicked from face to face, searching for that tell he believed singled out criminals. It was the same night Vanessa Price happened to do her weekly grocery run, searching for a new brand of vegan protein she'd been meaning to try. In the next few hours, fate and Wilcox's prejudice would collide with Vanessa's quiet world. The chain of events set to unfold would expose the darkest corners of Wilcox's career and reveal more about Vanessa's hidden might than he could possibly imagine. Vanessa carefully navigated the aisles of Whole Foods Market, pushing a small cart. She wore a casual gray sweatshirt, black leggings, and sneakers, nothing to signal wealth or prominence. In the produce section, she selected organic spinach, fresh blueberries, and some avocados. As she scanned the shelves for that elusive vegan protein powder, she felt a subtle prick of intuition. A presence lurked in the periphery of her mind. She glanced around, her investigator's instincts flaring. Nothing overtly alarming, just a tall, broad-shouldered figure standing by the store's entrance, scanning the crowd with an air of authority. Then he vanished from her line of sight. Vanessa shrugged off the feeling, chalking it up to the general tension of city life. After about 15 minutes of shopping, she headed to the checkout. The cashier, a polite young man named Brandon, chatted pleasantly. "Find everything okay?" Vanessa smiled. "Yes, finally found the protein powder. It took me a minute." He scanned her items. The total came to just over $50. She paid by credit card, bagged her groceries, and left with a soft thank you to Brandon. Outside, a light drizzle had begun, so she opened her umbrella and walked briskly toward her car parked 2 blocks away. Halfway down the block, she heard a sharp voice behind her, "Stop right there!" She turned to see a police officer, Officer Wilcox, closing in, hand on his belt near the holster. Her stomach clenched. She'd done nothing wrong, but she'd seen situations escalate for less. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. Wilcox fixed his gaze on her grocery bag. "I have reason to believe you shoplifted several items from that store." His tone was curt, exuding power. Confusion swept over her. "I paid at the register. You can check my receipt." "Don't move!" he snapped, ignoring her words. "Put the bag on the ground." Vanessa did as instructed, heart thudding. She reached into the bag, slowly retrieving the receipt. "Here, the cashier's name was Brandon," but Wilcox waved it away. "Hands behind your head, now!" Complying, Vanessa struggled to maintain composure. Her mind whirled. Does he see me as an easy target? Does he think I'm powerless? She reminded herself to remain calm, to avoid any sudden movement that could provoke him. Wilcox grabbed the grocery receipt from her hand, barely glancing at it before shoving it in his pocket. He then pulled out his cuffs. "You're coming with me for questioning." "That's not necessary," Vanessa said, forcing an even tone. "I've done nothing wrong. The store's cameras will confirm." He roughly turned her around and cuffed her wrists, ignoring every word she tried to speak. The tension of metal around her wrists brought a wave of indignation and fear. Passers-by slowed, some filming with their phones, others too nervous to intervene. Within minutes, a second police car arrived, and Wilcox shoved her into the back seat. As the vehicle pulled away, Vanessa realized she was living a scenario she'd seen reported countless times. A black individual, presumed guilty, thrown into a squad car on the flimsiest suspicion. But in this case, Wilcox had chosen the wrong person to victimize. Vanessa Price, the unseen billionaire with a razor-sharp mind for investigations. At the station, Vanessa's mugshot was taken, and she was processed like any other suspect. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow on the gray tile floors. She felt both anger and a fierce resolve. "Don't reveal anything yet," she reminded herself. "Assess the situation first." Officer Wilcox filled out paperwork at a nearby desk, his face set in grim satisfaction. To him, she was just another offender, presumably with no resources to fight back, another notch in his belt for a so-called successful arrest. An hour later, Vanessa found herself in a small interrogation room. The walls were painted dull beige, and a single camera was mounted in a corner. A metal table stood at the center, accompanied by 2 mismatched chairs, one for the detective, one for the suspect. She waited, forcing herself to remain calm, remembering every detail. The handcuff placement, Wilcox's unwillingness to examine her receipt, the presence of bystanders. Finally, Wilcox entered. He shut the door behind him and planted himself across the table. "So," he said, leaning forward, You want to tell me why you stole from Whole Foods? Vanessa remained poised. I didn't steal. I paid in full. The cashier can confirm it. The receipt was in your hands. Wilcox smirked, ignoring her statement. I have a sworn report from the store's manager claiming you hurried out with unpaid merchandise. That's all the judge is going to see, a manager's statement and an officer's word. Meanwhile, you have what? A flimsy slip of paper you could have found in the trash? Vanessa studied his face, searching for cracks in his bravado. Ask the cashier, check the store cameras, that's all it takes. He pressed his lips together. Some cameras were apparently malfunctioning tonight. Tough luck for you. As for the cashier, you think he wants to lose his job by going against his manager's story? I doubt it. He flipped open a file, scribbling notes. You can save us both time and sign a confession. Might get off with a fine if you're lucky. Her anger flared, but she kept her voice measured. I'm not signing anything. I'm calling my lawyer. Wilcox's eyes narrowed. You sure you can afford one? This isn't some fancy pro bono setup. You do realize you're in D.C., right? Lawyers don't come cheap. Vanessa's heart pounded. He's so certain I'm powerless, she thought. And in that moment, she decided that she had seen enough to confirm her suspicions of corruption. This was not just a simple misunderstanding. He'd orchestrated a scenario in which her innocence would be swept under the rug. Wilcox's confidence suggested he had done this before, and it was only effective if his target lacked influence or money. She slowly leaned back in her chair. Don't worry about how I'll pay. I have my ways. Wilcox gave a dismissive snort. Tell it to the judge. He stood abruptly, moving to the door. Enjoy your night in holding, thief. The door slammed behind him, the sound echoing. Left alone in the room, Vanessa inhaled deeply. She had rarely been on this side of the table, but she knew how the system worked. Time for damage control, she told herself. I'll contact my legal team, and I'll start pulling strings. Officer Wilcox wants a fight. He's about to get a war. It was 8 a.m. sharp when Vanessa's case was brought before a judge for a preliminary bail hearing. The courthouse buzzed with the usual chaos. Public defenders juggling files, prosecutors sipping coffee as they reviewed notes, and a sprinkling of concerned families lining the pews. Vanessa had spent the night in a holding cell, her phone confiscated upon arrest. Fortunately, she'd managed to send a cryptic message to her personal assistant, Jocelyn, who mobilized Vanessa's top legal contact, Andrew McMillan. Andrew was an experienced litigator from a well-known Washington firm, the kind of lawyer whose presence alone could shift a hearing's outcome. Vanessa, escorted by an officer, stood behind a wooden divider in the courtroom. She wore the same clothes from the previous evening, looking calm despite her exhaustion. At the prosecution table, Officer Wilcox sat next to a duty prosecutor, exchanging hushed whispers. His demeanor was as arrogant as ever. When the judge called the case, Andrew rose and spoke with measured confidence. Your Honor, I represent Miss Vanessa Price. We request immediate release on personal recognizance or minimal bail. My client poses no flight risk and maintains her innocence. The prosecutor, a woman named Maria Sanchez, countered. The store manager's statement indicates Miss Price stole over $100 worth of items. Officer Wilcox apprehended her leaving the premises. We recommend bail set at $5,000. Andrew's lips tightened. Your Honor, this is a baseless claim. My client has a receipt, which might be fake, the prosecutor interjected. We've been told the store's cameras conveniently malfunctioned. The manager insists Miss Price fled without paying. Vanessa's eyes flicked to Wilcox. He wore a smug expression, arms crossed. She could almost hear him thinking, no one will believe her. Andrew gently set a paper on the podium. Here's the bank statement showing the exact debit charge from Whole Foods at the corresponding date and time. This is not a forged slip of paper, Your Honor. We also have reason to believe the store's manager was coerced. We ask the court to consider the possibility that the arresting officer's report is incomplete. A murmur rippled through the gallery. The judge, a middle-aged man with thinning hair, scanned the documents Andrew provided. I see, Miss Sanchez. Do you have any preliminary response to these financial records? The prosecutor frowned, flipping through her notes. We haven't had time to validate them, Your Honor. The judge looked over his glasses. In light of this new information, I'm inclined to grant Miss Price's release under her own recognizance. She is to appear for the formal hearing in 2 weeks. That should be enough time for both sides to gather more evidence. He tapped his gavel once. Next case. Relief washed over Vanessa. She shot Andrew a grateful look, but her sense of vindication was fleeting. Wilcox gave her a pointed glare, signaling he wasn't done. As she left the courtroom, she heard him mutter to the prosecutor, "Don't worry, we'll find something else on her." Outside, Andrew led Vanessa to a quieter hallway. "We need to move fast," he said. "I have a feeling they might escalate this. Wilcox might try to fabricate more evidence or pressure witnesses. We should gather everything we can. Bank records, potential security footage from around the area, statements from the cashier if we can find him." Vanessa nodded, her voice steady. "I'm on it, and I'll do my own investigating. I have resources." Andrew paused, eyebrow raised. "Resources?" She offered a careful smile. "Let's just say I can access certain information that might be harder to come by in a standard legal case. I'll keep you posted." Andrew looked intrigued but didn't push. "All right, I'll trust your judgment. Let's coordinate daily." With that, Vanessa parted ways with her attorney, phone in hand, ready to contact her private network. She had stayed hidden for years, but this confrontation demanded she reveal at least part of her capabilities. Officer Wilcox had started a battle with someone who'd carefully cultivated a global web of allies, data forensics experts, and philanthropic influence. If he thought the night in holding was the end of it, he was sorely mistaken. The real fight was just beginning. Leaving the courthouse, Vanessa stepped into a brisk morning breeze. The city's thrumming energy enveloped her, sirens, construction clatter, and the chatter of passers-by. She found a quiet corner near the building, tapped her phone, and dialed Jocelyn's number. Jocelyn picked up on the second ring. "Vanessa, are you all right?" Jocelyn's voice was tight with concern. "I tried calling the station last night, but they wouldn't connect me." "It's fine, I'm out now," Vanessa replied. "I need you to schedule a meeting with our forensics team, and also get me the contact info for a private security firm we used last year, Kessler and Baines. I suspect we'll need some muscle." Her tone was calm, almost businesslike, but Jocelyn knew that signaled trouble for whoever had crossed Vanessa. "Right away. Anything else?" Vanessa glanced at the courthouse behind her. "Yes. Check any connections at Whole Foods corporate. Maybe they can provide a direct line for store security footage. And please track down the cashier who served me if possible. His name tag said Brandon. He might be a key witness." "Consider it done. You good otherwise?" Vanessa allowed a small smile to creep in. Jocelyn was more than just an assistant. She was a friend. "I'm fine. We'll talk soon." She ended the call and began her walk to the parking lot. As she slid into her sleek black Tesla, her mind churned with speculation about Wilcox's deeper motives. Was this random, or was there a pattern? She suspected he'd done this many times before to vulnerable people who couldn't fight back. That possibility fueled her determination. In the next few days, her quiet investigations began. Jocelyn's efficiency ensured that by midweek, Vanessa had a preliminary dossier on Reggie Wilcox, a pattern of arrests with shaky evidence, multiple civilian complaints, and at least one rumored internal affair probe that mysteriously closed. She also learned that Wilcox had an unusually high cost of living, with a second home in a pricier part of Virginia, a property far beyond what a regular officer's salary could support. The more Vanessa uncovered, the clearer it became that Wilcox exploited his badge for personal gain. She meticulously mapped timelines of his arrests, cross-referencing them with known complaints from local community advocates. The lines drew a disturbing pattern of racial profiling, intimidation, and a near-perfect success rate in forcing plea deals. But she needed proof. Hard, indisputable proof that he was lying about her and possibly about many others. So she assembled a small team of digital forensics experts, legal researchers, and one ex-cop turned investigator who specialized in unmasking police misconduct. Their immediate goal? To secure the store's camera footage from that fateful evening and cross-check it with any external street cameras that might have caught Vanessa entering or exiting Whole Foods. By day's end, they discovered a potential lead. A local restaurant 2 doors down had a camera pointed at the sidewalk. If that feed hadn't been malfunctioning, it might show Vanessa leaving the store with her grocery bag. Over the phone, the restaurant owner seemed cooperative, though cautious, when Vanessa's associate explained the request. Meanwhile, Jocelyn succeeded in finding Brandon, the cashier. He was nervous to talk at first, but after hearing Vanessa's name, he agreed to a discreet meeting. And so the net began to tighten around Wilcox. Vanessa was not alone. She was rallying an entire operation, powered by a fortune she rarely flaunted. The next step was to ensure all the puzzle pieces formed a clear picture of Wilcox's systematic abuse, and to share it at the perfect moment, delivering a blow from which he might never recover. Vanessa arranged to meet Brandon in a cozy cafe across town, far from the store and the prying eyes of anyone associated with Wilcox. The place was a small, tucked-away spot named Compass Coffee, a real and popular chain in D.C., known for its laid-back atmosphere. Vanessa arrived early, choosing a corner table that allowed her a clear view of the entrance. Brandon arrived wearing a hooded jacket, his expression cautious. He clutched a messenger bag over his shoulder. Spotting Vanessa, he sidled to the table and offered a tentative smile. She stood, extending a hand in greeting. "Thanks for coming," she said softly. "I know this might be uncomfortable." He exhaled and slid into the seat opposite her. "You said on the phone that you just want to clarify what happened, but if my manager finds out..." Vanessa understood his worry. "Don't worry, I'll keep you out of any direct confrontation as much as possible, but it's vital we establish the truth." The barista approached and they both ordered cappuccinos. Once the barista left, Brandon leaned forward, voice low. "I remember you, Miss Price. You bought spinach, avocados, that specialty protein, some fruit. You paid with a credit card, and you even asked about a coupon for organic pears." He rattled off details that aligned perfectly with Vanessa's memory. "I printed your receipt and handed it to you. There was nothing suspicious at all." A surge of gratitude and validation rose in Vanessa's chest. "Thank you. What happened after I left?" Brandon wrung his hands, eyes shifting. About 15 minutes later, Officer Wilcox showed up. The store manager, Ms. Huxley, suddenly insisted you'd left without paying. I told her I rang you up, but she just glared. Wilcox listened to her story and then told me not to interfere. He basically said I'd be an accessory if I contradicted the manager. I was terrified. Vanessa nodded, her face controlled but anger simmering beneath. "So the manager claimed I was a thief in front of Wilcox and you were threatened not to speak up?" Brandon's cheeks reddened. "Yes, I didn't know what to do. I need my job, and Wilcox, he's scary. He has this way of looking at you, like you're done for if you cross him." She rested a reassuring hand on his arm. "You're doing the right thing by coming forward, and I promise, I won't let anything happen to you. I can help with legal counsel or relocation if it gets that serious." Relief tinged Brandon's smile. "I'd be willing to give a statement. I can't just stay quiet knowing you're innocent." Their cappuccinos arrived. They sipped in relative silence, broken occasionally by hushed conversation. Before leaving, Vanessa recorded a short statement on her phone as evidence, with Brandon's permission. He recounted the story again, calmly and precisely, a witness account that shattered Wilcox's claim. When they parted ways, Vanessa felt an even stronger resolve. She had a direct witness now, along with corroborating financial evidence. In her experience, that alone might not topple an entrenched system. But if she could secure the actual store footage or show that it was tampered with, the case against Wilcox would grow too large to dismiss. Stepping out of the cafe, Vanessa walked into a crisp afternoon breeze. Her phone buzzed, a text from Jocelyn reading, "Call me ASAP. Important updates." Vanessa braced herself, heart pounding. The game is in motion, she thought. I have to stay ahead of Wilcox or he'll bury me, and countless others beneath his lies. Vanessa connected with Jocelyn as she stepped into her parked Tesla. "What do we have?" "Two things," Jocelyn said, her voice crackling with restrained excitement. "First, the restaurant camera we found. They have footage showing you walking out of Whole Foods with a bag in hand, literally scanning your receipt as you exit. It's time-stamped." A burst of triumph rose in Vanessa's chest. "That's perfect." "There's more," Jocelyn continued. "One of our contacts found discrepancies in the store's official security logs. The feed was cut for about a 10-minute window, which just so happens to align with your checkout time. Also, the brand's central IT team never authorized or recorded that outage. It suggests sabotage." Vanessa let out a low whistle. "Sabotage? That means Wilcox or his associates might have tampered with the store cameras to remove evidence." "That's what it looks like," Jocelyn agreed. "If we can link that back to Wilcox, it's over for him." Vanessa nodded to herself, gripping the steering wheel. "We will. Thanks, Jocelyn. Keep me posted on any new developments." She hung up and stared out the windshield, mind buzzing. With Brandon's testimony, the external camera footage, and the suspicious store logs, a compelling case was forming. But she knew it wasn't enough to just exonerate herself. She wanted to expose every facet of Wilcox's misconduct. If he's done this once, he's done it many times. Over the next few days, her investigative network began combing through Wilcox's arrest history. They discovered a startling pattern of arrests in lower-income areas, often with similarly missing or tampered evidence. Several prior defendants in those arrests had ended up pleading guilty despite questionable circumstances. A handful of local activists recalled Wilcox's name with bitterness. They'd tried to raise alarm bells about him for years. Their testimonies, combined with Vanessa's data, might catalyze a broader inquiry. On a crisp Saturday morning, Vanessa invited Andrew McMillan, her attorney, and a private ex-detective named Harris into her condominium's secure conference room. The space was minimalist yet high-tech, with soundproof walls and a large digital display on the far side. "Thank you both for coming," she said, greeting them warmly. "Let's lay out our evidence." They spent 2 hours in methodical review. Andrew showed how each piece could play out legally, from the direct footage to Brandon's statement to the suspicious camera logs. Harris contributed insights on how Wilcox might try to undermine or discredit the evidence. Their synergy was palpable: Vanessa's investigative prowess, Andrew's legal acumen, and Harris's deep knowledge of policing tactics. "The strongest angle here," Andrew concluded, "is that Wilcox not only fabricated charges against you, but is part of a pattern of malicious arrests. If we expose that in court, the judge might not only dismiss your case, but also open an investigation into Wilcox's entire record." Harris tapped a pen on the table. "I've seen guys like him. They rely on fear, intimidation, and the assumption that no one will connect the dots. You, Miss Price, are the last person he expected to tangle with." Vanessa felt a surge of determination. She was far from done. "We need to push for a formal inquiry before the hearing. Let's see if we can get the district attorney's office to look at this evidence. If they realize they're prosecuting an innocent person while a corrupt cop feeds them falsehoods, that might make them pivot away from Wilcox." Andrew nodded. "I'll set up a meeting with the DA's office next week. Meanwhile, we gather more statements from any of Wilcox's past victims or store staff he's coerced." "Exactly," Vanessa agreed. "We'll bring the house down on him and make sure it's done above board." That evening, as Andrew and Harris left, Vanessa stood by the large windows of her condo, gazing out at the city lights. Her reflection stared back, expression resolute. "I never sought the spotlight," she thought. "But if it's the only way to end Wilcox's reign of terror, I'll step onto center stage, and I'll win." The following week brought a flurry of activity. Vanessa and Andrew secured a meeting with an assistant district attorney named Gabrielle Huang, whose reputation for integrity preceded her. They arrived at the DA's office with a neatly organized binder of evidence: time-stamped stills from the restaurant camera, Brandon's sworn affidavit, and the suspicious logs from the Whole Foods security system. They also included transcripts of preliminary interviews with community members who alleged Wilcox had threatened or coerced them. Miss Huang browsed the binder with grave interest. Her office was modest, lined with legal texts and scattered case files. She flicked through pages, pausing at times to ask pointed questions. Occasionally, her eyebrows shot up at a particularly damning piece of data. "Miss Price, Mr. McMillan," she began, setting the binder down, "this is extensive. If true, it suggests Officer Wilcox has been systematically falsifying police reports and intimidating witnesses. We have to validate it, of course. But I can tell you, if it checks out, the prosecution's case against Miss Price won't just collapse, it'll implode." Andrew nodded. "That's our hope. Miss Price is innocent, and we believe the city needs to confront Wilcox's pattern of corruption." Huang exhaled, steepling her fingers. "We'll investigate immediately, but you must understand the official hearing against Miss Price is in just a few days. I don't know if we can finalize everything by then." Vanessa met Huang's gaze. "I understand. Do what you must. I only ask that the truth be heard. I'm also prepared to testify about Wilcox's tactics." Huang offered a slight smile. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention." She scribbled some notes. "I'll be in touch." Leaving the DA's office, Vanessa felt a measure of relief. At least now the official channels were alerted, but she couldn't rely solely on bureaucracy. Wilcox might sense his exposure and try something desperate. Sure enough, the next day Andrew called her, voice tinged with urgency. "The prosecutor just filed an additional charge. Resisting arrest. They're piling it on." Vanessa rolled her eyes at the blatant tactic. "I never resisted. It's a lie." "I know," Andrew said. "They're clearly trying to pressure you into a plea or get the court to deny any leniency, but we're not backing down." News of the case began to leak into local media. A small local outlet ran a headline: "DC officer accuses woman of shoplifting. Defense alleges racial profiling." Comments ranged from outraged condemnation of police abuse to supportive claims that the suspect must be lying. The swirl of public opinion confirmed Wilcox's strategy: controlling the narrative to overshadow facts. Meanwhile, Vanessa's behind-the-scenes operations continued. Harris discovered that the store manager, Miss Huxley, had abruptly gone on leave, declining all requests for comment. Brandon, the cashier, reported that he'd been questioned by another officer who tried to make him sign a statement contradicting his original story. Brandon refused, but it left him shaken. On a rainy afternoon, Vanessa visited Brandon at his small apartment to reassure him. She provided the contact for a pro bono lawyer who'd protect him if harassment continued. Looking into Brandon's anxious eyes, Vanessa felt a surge of protectiveness. This young man was risking his livelihood for the truth. I won't let him suffer alone. As the court date loomed, the atmosphere crackled with tension. Each day, new bits of evidence surfaced or new intimidation tactics arose from Wilcox's camp. Yet Vanessa remained steadfast, bolstered by her team and resources. She refused to bow under the weight of false charges. Let the storm rage, she thought. I have more than enough strength to weather it, and then to make sure the guilty face the consequences. The night before Vanessa's court hearing arrived, bringing with it a swirl of apprehension and readiness. Downtown lights shimmered against a cloudy sky, while cars honked in overlapping rush-hour crescendos. Inside her condominium, Vanessa convened one final strategy session with Andrew, Harris, and Jocelyn. Officer Wilcox is likely counting on the typical fear factor, Harris said. He expects the false accusations to stick, because that's what always happened before. Andrew flipped through a dossier. The DA's office has begun verifying our evidence, but it's not fully concluded. They won't openly drop the charges yet. However, we have enough to sway the judge if we present it properly. Jocelyn chimed in, referencing her laptop. We have statements from two other individuals who claim Wilcox arrested them under dubious circumstances. They're willing to testify if the court allows. They'll attend tomorrow. Vanessa nodded. Good. The defense of a single shoplifting case can expand if the judge deems Wilcox's credibility relevant. Andrew, you'll push for that, right? Absolutely, Andrew confirmed. It's an uphill battle. Some judges prefer not to complicate a hearing with broader misconduct claims. But if we show a consistent pattern, the judge might have no choice but to consider it. Vanessa glanced around the table, a wave of gratitude surging for her allies. They were risking their own reputations to dismantle Wilcox's ploy and help the broader community who suffered under his actions. Her heart pounded with a mixture of fury and resolve. After finalizing a few details, they adjourned. Andrew and Harris left, each tasked with last-minute follow-ups. Jocelyn stayed behind, eyeing Vanessa with concern. You okay? Jocelyn asked gently. Vanessa leaned against the kitchen counter, arms folded. I'm determined, she said honestly. But yes, I feel the weight of it. This hearing is bigger than me now. So many lives were impacted by Wilcox. Jocelyn reached out and squeezed Vanessa's hand. You're not alone in this. Tomorrow we present the truth, and truth is powerful. A slight smile touched Vanessa's lips. It is. After Jocelyn departed, Vanessa found herself alone in the quiet condo. She paced to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. The lights of the Capitol dome glowed faintly in the distance, a reminder of the city's illusions of justice and power. She reflected on her entire journey, the false arrest, a night in holding, the intimidation from Wilcox, the courage of Brandon, the support of her team, and her own hidden identity as a billionaire investigator who could fight back like few others could. Tomorrow, she thought, the stage is set. She would walk into that courtroom as Vanessa Price, the ordinary woman accused of shoplifting, but she'd have an arsenal of data, witnesses, and impeccable legal firepower at her back. No matter how skillfully Wilcox might lie on the stand, she was ready to reveal his corruption. She took one final look at the city lights, inhaling deeply. Then she returned to her desk to review her notes, determined to face the next day's battle fully prepared. Sleep might be elusive, but her resolve burned brightly enough to see her through the dawn. The morning dawned overcast, casting a somber hue across the D.C. skyline. By 9 a.m., the district courthouse was bustling with attorneys, press, and curious onlookers who had caught wind of the unusual nature of Vanessa Price's hearing. A small local news crew hovered by the steps, hoping for a statement. Vanessa arrived with Andrew. Her attire was professional but understated, a crisp white blouse paired with a charcoal blazer. She greeted Brandon, who waited outside the courtroom, looking visibly anxious. You'll be okay, she reassured him. Just tell the truth. Inside, the courtroom buzzed as spectators filled rows. Wilcox stood near the prosecution's table, wearing his uniform. His gaze locked on Vanessa, brimming with contempt. She met his stare calmly, unflinching. He can glare all he wants, she thought. He no longer controls the narrative. Judge Evelyn Hardwick, a poised woman in her 50s, took the bench. With a sharp rap of her gavel, she called the hearing to order. "Miss Price, you stand accused of shoplifting and resisting arrest," began the prosecutor, a new face named Richard Doherty. "Officer Wilcox's report states you left a Whole Foods without paying, then refused to cooperate when confronted." Andrew rose, buttoning his suit jacket. "Your Honor, my client categorically denies these charges. We have evidence proving her innocence and further evidence implicating Officer Wilcox in misconduct." A ripple of murmurs swept the courtroom. Judge Hardwick raised an eyebrow. "Proceed." Andrew methodically presented the external camera footage from the neighboring restaurant. The clip clearly showed Vanessa exiting the store, reading over her receipt. The timestamp matched the alleged incident window. Then he introduced Brandon's sworn affidavit. Taking the stand, Brandon explained how Vanessa had indeed paid, how the store manager later claimed otherwise, and how Wilcox threatened him. His voice trembled, but he remained steadfast. "She had a credit card. She swiped it. I bagged her groceries. There was no theft." The prosecutor tried to rattle Brandon during cross-examination, insinuating he changed his story under pressure, but Brandon held firm, repeating the same account. Next, Andrew presented partial store logs showing the camera outage. "We have reason to believe this outage was deliberate," Andrew told the judge. "Combined with the external footage, it strongly suggests the store's own cameras were tampered with to remove proof of Miss Price's purchase." The judge frowned. "Mr. Doherty, how do you respond to these claims?" The prosecutor cleared his throat. "We need more time to investigate. It's possible the store manager was mistaken, and the camera failure was a coincidence." Andrew pressed on. "Your Honor, we also have statements from past victims who claim Officer Wilcox engaged in similar tactics, manufacturing charges." Wilcox rose to his feet in indignation. "Objection! None of that is relevant to the alleged theft." Judge Hardwick studied Wilcox with a cool gaze. "Usually prior allegations are not automatically admissible, but if they suggest a pattern that undermines the credibility of the arresting officer, it could be relevant. Mr. McMillan, do you have those statements ready?" Andrew nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge sighed, flipping through the file Andrew submitted. The tension in the room was palpable. If she admitted these broader misconduct allegations, it could trigger a full inquiry that would overshadow the simple shoplifting case. A hush fell as the judge took several minutes to read. Finally, she addressed the courtroom. "In light of the camera evidence, the cashier's testimony, and these alleged patterns of officer misconduct, I find the prosecution's case against Miss Price to be severely compromised. As to whether Officer Wilcox has engaged in wrongdoing, that may fall beyond the immediate scope of this hearing. However, I will inform the District Attorney's Office of these developments. Effective immediately, Miss Price is released from all charges pertaining to theft and resisting arrest." She struck the gavel. "Case dismissed." A stunned silence froze the courtroom, then erupted into low chatter. Officer Wilcox looked thunderstruck, jaw clenched. The prosecutor stood speechless. Brandon nearly sagged with relief, and Andrew placed a steady hand on Vanessa's shoulder. Vanessa stood, exhaling a long breath. Case dismissed. She had won. But as she moved to exit, Wilcox stepped toward her, fury flickering in his eyes. "This isn't over," he muttered, voice low enough that only she could hear. She met his gaze, unafraid. "No," she said softly, "it's not." Because the evidence gathered wasn't just enough to clear her name, it was enough to ignite a deeper investigation that might finally hold Wilcox accountable for everything he'd done. With that, she walked out of the courtroom free, determined to deliver the final blow of justice. The following day saw a tidal shift in momentum. The district attorney's office, spurred by Judge Hardwick's remarks, opened an internal review of Officer Wilcox. Anonymous tips started flooding in. Former suspects, local activists, and even a few fellow officers who'd long harbored suspicions. The media, hungry for a scandal, latched onto the story of a wrongful arrest in Whole Foods, adding a racial profiling angle that stoked public outrage. Yet Wilcox refused to stand down. Through his lawyer, he claimed Miss Price had manipulated evidence and coerced the cashier. He insisted he'd followed procedure and that the missing store footage was a mere coincidence. Some segments of the public believed him. After all, not everyone was ready to accept that a veteran cop might be systematically abusing his power. Vanessa, meanwhile, continued operating behind the scenes. She quietly funded a legal team that reached out to Wilcox's past victims, offering pro bono representation to reopen old convictions. This had a snowball effect, uncovering more instances where Wilcox allegedly falsified arrest reports or threatened witnesses to ensure convictions. Inside the police department, tensions mounted. Captain Sandra Novak, head of internal affairs, began quietly interviewing officers who worked alongside Wilcox. Some of them described how Wilcox boasted about cleaning the streets, but never acknowledged the borderline or outright illegal tactics he employed. Others said they saw him meeting mysterious figures outside official duty hours, suggesting potential corruption. These interviews leaked to the press, fueling suspicion. Watching it all unfold from her condominium, Vanessa felt a mixture of relief and anger. Relief that the truth was emerging, anger that Wilcox had managed to operate unchecked for so long. Late one evening, her phone buzzed with a call from Andrew. "Vanessa, you won't believe this," he said, voice tinged with excitement. "The city's police union is distancing itself from Wilcox. They want a scapegoat. The union's spokesperson just gave a statement about rogue elements tarnishing the force. They basically threw him under the bus." She closed her eyes. "So they're isolating him. Makes sense. It means we're close to a major breakthrough. He'll be indicted soon if the DA moves forward." Andrew hesitated. "Unless he tries something drastic. Cornered animals can bite back. Be cautious." Vanessa swallowed. She remembered Wilcox's last words in the courtroom. This isn't over. Would he dare lash out physically? Possibly, but she wasn't defenseless. She quietly arranged enhanced security for both Brandon and herself, ensuring round-the-clock monitoring. The next afternoon, Jocelyn burst into Vanessa's office, hair slightly disheveled, eyes ablaze with alarm. "Wilcox showed up at Brandon's apartment building," she blurted. "One of our security guys spotted him. We got Brandon out in time. He's safe in a hotel under an alias. But it means Wilcox is desperate." Vanessa's jaw tightened. "He's crossing lines he can't uncross. Let him try. Every reckless move he makes only buries him deeper." Their eyes met, an unspoken certainty passing between them. Wilcox's intimidation tactics might have worked in the shadows before, but now the entire city watched. One more misstep, and the final hammer of justice would fall. As the pressure built, Vanessa realized the time was ripe for a decisive blow. She'd collected a mountain of evidence pointing to Wilcox's misconduct. What she needed was a direct link, a smoking gun that proved, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that he orchestrated false arrests for personal gain. If she could secure that final piece, the district attorney would have no choice but to charge him under multiple felony counts. Enter ex-detective Harris. Late one evening, he delivered a thick envelope to Vanessa at her condo. Inside were documents detailing suspicious bank deposits to an account in Wilcox's name. They dated back several years, with lumps of unexplained cash appearing after each major arrest. The amounts ranged from a few hundred to several $1,000s, eventually paying for a second property in Fairfax County, Virginia. Vanessa's eyes widened at the pattern. Is he receiving kickbacks from local business owners or criminals who benefit from false arrests? The idea ignited both outrage and a savage satisfaction. This was the corruption she suspected. "Where did you get this?" Vanessa asked, voice trembling with adrenaline. Harris offered a tight smile. "I had a buddy in financial crimes. When I told him we suspected Wilcox was dirty, he did a quiet check. These transactions stand out like neon. He cross-referenced them with the timing of certain arrests. They line up." Vanessa gripped the envelope. "This is it. We can present this to Miss Huang at the DA's office." Harris nodded. "I'll forward electronic copies too, but be careful. Wilcox might catch wind we have his financials. We should move fast." Indeed they did. The next day, Vanessa and Andrew marched into the district attorney's office, handing Gabrielle Huang the documents. Huang's jaw clenched as she flipped through the pages. "This is damning," she said, the overhead fluorescence reflecting off her glasses. "If we confirm these deposits are linked to coerced arrests, we can file felony charges, extortion, obstruction of justice, and more," Andrew spoke up. "We can also show a direct link to Miss Price's case. He arrested her around the same time another deposit landed, though we can't be sure it's connected yet." Huang nodded gravely. "I'll convene an urgent review with the lead investigators. If all checks out, we'll file charges swiftly." Leaving the office, Vanessa felt the tension of months unraveling. She locked eyes with Andrew, a silent agreement passing between them. We're at the threshold of victory. But the final twist arrived that evening, a frantic call from Brandon. "Wilcox is outside the hotel, banging on doors, looking for me. Vanessa's pulse pounded. "Stay calm, don't open the door. Our security team is on the way." Within minutes, her private security detail confronted Wilcox in the hallway. According to their report, he'd been ranting about traitors and lies, demanding to speak with Brandon. The hotel manager threatened to call the police, and ironically, that was enough to send Wilcox scurrying. Vanessa's expression hardened when she got the update. Wilcox was unraveling, his calm veneer replaced by desperation. He knows time is running out. The next morning, headlines blared, "Officer Wilcox under investigation, evidence of illicit bank deposits emerges." The media storm hammered the final nail. The DA's office, citing unprecedented allegations of corruption, suspended Wilcox pending an arrest warrant. He was officially a disgraced officer, just waiting for the official charge. Vanessa gazed at the news feed on her phone, exhaling a breath she'd been holding for what felt like an eternity. "Justice is near," she thought, "but I won't breathe easy until he's in handcuffs." Within days, the district attorney's office issued a warrant for Reggie Wilcox's arrest on multiple felony counts: fabrication of evidence, extortion, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. It was a seismic event in the city's law enforcement community. News cameras lined the precinct where Wilcox had once swaggered. He arrived in cuffs, head bowed, as officers he once worked alongside looked on in silence. For Vanessa, it was a moment of vindication and bittersweet relief. She watched the live footage in her condo, the triumphant swirl of emotions settling into a calm acceptance. She had set out to prove her innocence, but in the process, she'd unearthed a deeper truth: that Wilcox's corruption harmed countless individuals who lacked her resources to fight back. Over the next few weeks, details of Wilcox's operations dripped into public record. He had allegedly struck a deal with certain business owners, particularly those anxious about shoplifting or loitering issues, to plant suspects and forcibly remove them from the area. In exchange, Wilcox received cash or favors under the table. Some of his victims ended up with criminal records they never deserved. Wilcox's trial loomed, and the DA's office called on multiple witnesses, including Vanessa, Brandon, and other past victims. The preliminary hearings painted Wilcox as an officer who capitalized on the system's blind trust, using intimidation to guarantee guilty pleas. Vanessa's testimony was particularly compelling. She recounted how Wilcox refused to look at her receipt, how he mocked her ability to afford a lawyer, and how he manipulated the store manager to concoct false accusations. The public outcry was immense. Many demanded sweeping reform in the police department, while others worried about tarnishing the reputation of law enforcement as a whole. But the evidence was undeniable. The chain of events, camera tampering, false manager statements, threats to witnesses, couldn't be dismissed as a mere coincidence. In the midst of this legal storm, Vanessa reached out to Brandon, ensuring his well-being. He'd moved to a safer neighborhood with a new job, thanks to the legal support and a discreet financial cushion provided by Vanessa. She also set up a small trust for Wilcox's other victims, helping them access legal counsel to clear their records. On the day Wilcox ultimately pleaded guilty to multiple charges, Vanessa stood in the courtroom gallery, quietly witnessing the final act of their battle. Gone was the arrogant officer who once smirked at her plight. Before the judge, he appeared gaunt, perspiration beading on his forehead. His voice trembled as he delivered a reluctant admission of guilt, part of a plea deal that would keep him behind bars for years. When the proceedings ended, Vanessa slipped out without fanfare, refusing offers from the press for a statement. She didn't need the spotlight or the applause. The cosmic scale of justice had been rebalanced, at least in her corner of the world. Stepping into the warm sunlight, she glanced at the courthouse steps where she herself had once stood as a defendant. The memory felt distant, like a film reel from another era. Hard karma, she thought. It always comes back, and sometimes it arrives by the very road you tried to control. Though her heart still carried the scars of fear and humiliation from the false arrest, she knew this much: Reggie Wilcox's downfall meant fewer innocent people would be trapped in his snare. For Vanessa Price, the billionaire investigator, there could be no greater reward than that. Thank you for journeying with Vanessa Price. From a harrowing false arrest to the resolute pursuit of truth that ultimately shattered a corrupt officer's long-standing facade. Her quiet courage, reinforced by powerful allies and meticulous investigation, shines as a reminder that when injustice seems insurmountable, tenacity and evidence can triumph over even the most entrenched misconduct. What began as one woman's fight to clear her name became a broader crusade for others who, for too long, were silenced by fear. If you found inspiration in Vanessa's story, her stealthy brilliance, her resolve to protect the vulnerable, and her unyielding stand against corruption, please like this video to show your support. Share it with those who value stories of redemption and justice, and subscribe to our channel for more riveting narratives. Your engagement helps us continue shining a light on hidden truths, both in fiction and beyond. Together, let's keep raising our voices for justice.